Welcome, everyone, to a very special Record Club episode of the Jams and Tea podcast, where we spin the jams and spill the tea. And this week, we are going to be covering Tyler's recommended album, the long-awaited debut of talking about the band Los Campesinos. We're talking about their first album.
Yep.
Hold on now, Youngster.
Yep.
And of course, we are joined by Nebraskan veteran Connor here to talk about it with us. If you haven't seen the main episode already this week, please go right ahead and go watch that. We have covered the new album by The Killers, Pressure Machine, as well as the new album by Boldy James and The Alchemists, Bo Jackson. Why don't name your album title and name? It makes that shit confusing, Mr. Jackson. Damn it.
I just want to say that I love how you referring to Connor as Nebraskan veteran makes him sound like he's come back from war.
And we thank you for your service.
It's a battleground over there in Iowa.
Okay.
All those cornfields. It's just
okay. So
with all the children and such.
Something that's kind of unofficial, but has been a bit of a theme for a number of my record club albums this year. I mean, the Wrens, the Meadowlands is one. Modest Mouse, Lonesome Crowded West is another one. And of course, the last record club that I recommended, Broken Social Scenes, You Forgot It, and People is another one. We're all record clubs that are kind of oriented around the theme of, I guess, my adolescence and the music that soundtracked very sort of specific and key parts of my life when I was growing up and going through like the classical experiences of being a teenager, becoming an adult, and during a period where like music is a huge fixture of my life. And so like there are these very clear, turbulent periods of my life that are like very clearly soundtracked by certain albums. And that's kind of a recurring theme of not all of the record clubs I've been recommending this year, but those ones in particular that I mentioned, the Meadowlands, You Forgot It, and People, and
your coming of age playlist is fire.
Yeah, to a certain extent, those albums basically, and of course we've touched on other records as well in different sort of formats as well, like the discography of Frightened Rabbit and Twilight Sad, for instance, also fit under this umbrella. These artists who are very important to me because their music is deeply associated with a very particular stage of my life and a kind of very particular transition in my life from one stage to the next. And so Los Campesinos, Hold On Now, Youngster is the next in this, I guess, series, informal series for me. And it won't be the last that we do this year either. There's plenty more coming in that regard too. But in many ways, it's kind of the fulcrum record in a lot of senses that this whole informal series of mine revolves around. It's not necessarily the record that I've loved for the longest. It's not necessarily the record that I have the most emotionally intense memories associated with. It's not necessarily the record that makes me the most nostalgic or intense in my emotions or whatever, but it's the record that I feel like captures exactly the way that I felt when I was 17, 18, 19, really that particular period from 17 to 19, in this very sort of acute and idiosyncratic and unique way through the lens of this culture and these people that I, on the surface, really have nothing in common with. And yet the way that they emote, the way they write, the things they talk about, the complicated and sometimes messy and frequently ugly emotions that they capture are so like distilled and so unabashedly in your face that their specificity is transcended and they become these calling cards of this general feeling of that of growing up and thinking, what the fuck is happening and who the fuck am I and why the fuck do I feel so intensely about everything? and Los Campesinos are a band that, if anything, communicate the feeling of feeling very intensely about everything and not making even the slightest attempt to hide that or to button that down or to make that more appealing or accessible. It's just like raw balls to the wall feeling, and but it's artful, right? It's their lyricism, and we're going to get into it on a lot of detail with this album, is very poetic and very hard on sleeve and very kind of knotty and complex and direct, but also like lines that there are some lines that hit you really, really directly, and there are other lines that kind of like take root in your subconscious and start to haunt you. But it's all very truthful and clear and poignant emotionally. And so, who are Los Campesinos? Los Campesinos are a Welsh band, Welsh kind of rock band, I suppose. They describe themselves as the very tongue-in-cheek as the UK's first and only emo band. Which obviously is not true, but it speaks to the, I guess, intensity with which they regard themselves in a very kind of self-aware, ironic, winking way. They're also very heavily linked to the indie pop scene of the 2000s and the twee scene that is associated with as well, and the kind of a hybrid fusion of that kind of very jangly, bright indie pop and snotty, punky emo. And they're kind of this transmogrification of these two aesthetics into this one unique and very distinct thing. So yeah, they're Welsh. They have gone through a number of lineup changes over the years, but constants include frontman Gareth. And much like the Ramones, they've taken on this thing of referring to themselves as first name Campesinos, as their kind of stage names, which is cute and speaks to the very familial aspects. Yeah, yes, yeah. I'm proud of myself for thinking of the Ramones and not Ween to make that comparison. But it's very much more akin to the Ramones because it's this.
I'm disappointed in myself for thinking it.
Because it's this familial thing, right? Like it's this band of people that feel very much like a family, even if they're not all related. Although I think some of them are. They're these characters that very much come together to form this unified whole rather than a collection of various characters. They are very much a singular voice. And Gareth and Alexandra on this record, these two are very much at the center of it. The writing is, I think, all, if not all, mostly done by Gareth, and his very distinct and unique personality is kind of snotty, aggressive, but playful attitude is very much at the core of the appeal of this record. And if this record doesn't resonate with you, it'll also be at the core probably of what holds you at a distance from it, because it's very, its own thing. And that's the beautiful appeal, the beautiful kind of unique thing about it. I mean, all the best bands, all my favorite bands have something, I guess, unique about the personalities or about the approach that separates them from the pack, even if what they're doing is very musically similar to other acts. Los Campesinos are an entirely different ballpark because the personalities are entirely unique and the music is entirely unique. And so, yeah, that's the basic groundwork laid. But we do have a guest with us, and we do have a guest with us for a reason. So Connor, I'd love if you could speak now for a bit about what Los Campesinos means to you, your relationship with this band and this record specifically, and how this record came to be in your life and what your relationship with this album is.
Yeah, so I've heard the name Los Campesinos for a while. Like, I heard people talking about them. I've seen the name around, and especially because I was really into this other band that was from actually pretty much the same scene, I believe, which is, of course, Johnny Foreigner. Mm-hmm. Specifically, that album, Waited Up Till It Was Light, my Twitter picture, as you may know. But like, I think it was like, I want to say freshman year of college, listening to that album just constantly. And I remember like people would compare them to Los Campesinos all the time. So I was like, okay, I got to check these guys out. And I listened to, of course, kind of like the last record club we did with Broken Social Scene. The first song I heard was their biggest song, You Me Dancing. And I watched the music video, which is a great music video. If you haven't seen it, it's like fully animated, super colorful. It's like war. Yeah, I don't even remember, but it's really cool visually. But I was listening to it and I was like, this is cool, but I don't know about these vocals. I don't know if I can get into them. And now, well, I got into them quite a bit. This was actually not the first album that I heard from them. The first album that I heard was the next, which they would release the same year, 2008, called We Are Beautiful, We Are Doomed. Absolutely amazing album, by the way. If you love this, check that one out. It's amazing. But then I listened to this, and even though I didn't like it as much at the time, I still really loved it. And I'm trying to remember like the exact moment that it really clicked with me. I think honestly, I was just mowing the lawn or something, just something mundane like that. But I put on Hold On Now, Youngster, and I felt like I was like at a like a high school, like the best high school homecoming I've ever been to or something like that. Like I just, it really clicked with me, just the youthfulness and all like the energy that this band has. And of course, just the wide array of instrumentation that pops up on all the records, but especially this one. It's kind of hard to like explain why it hits me so hard. It's one of those albums that just like perfectly treads the line between really fun and high energy, also really sad too. Like it's pretty much the perfect blend. It's in that way, it's kind of like another album, Broken Social Scene, You Forgot It in People, which and we already mentioned
we theme here.
Yeah. And what's funny is while I was listening to this album and doing some research, I didn't even know, and this was a big discovery, that this was produced by Dave Neufeld, who also produced You Forgot It in People, and it was recorded at the same studio. So back when I said in the You Forgot It in People review, I was like, I'm pretty sure Los Campesinos is influenced by these guys. Well, there you go. I was right.
I mean, to be fair, you would never like inherently make that sort of connection about them actually being recorded together, considering that one band is Canadian and one band is Welsh. Like not typically worlds you see overlapping. And yet when you listen to the two records, even if you don't, aren't aware, like we weren't aware of the actual tangible connection between the two, they're very much records that are rooted in the same sort of feeling and rooted in the same sort of experiences broadly, and capturing the same sort of like raucous familial energy that underpins a particular stage in your life that is full with very complex and intensely felt emotions that are very related to the people in your world. So and in that sense, it's kind of beautiful and perfect that we're doing them side by side in terms of my record club selections, because they complement each other in beautiful ways, despite being musically very different.
Yeah, and in a lot of ways, they are similar, just like you said, with capturing that very specific youthful energy and angst. And one thing that I always loved about just Los Campesinos in general is their amazing sense of humor, just all over this record.
Yeah, no, beautifully said. I guess while we're on the topic of, feelings on this band and this record in general, I'll turn to Morgan and Jake next. Morgan, I know you came to this record reasonably recently off of the back of the wave of hype that Connor and I were dishing onto this band. What was your experience like listening to this record, and how do you feel about it, I guess?
Well, yeah, as you said, it was sort of off the back of you and subsequently Connor absolutely losing your shit all over again for this band, even though you were familiar with them already, which is a wonderful thing to feel, because I've been there before with certain bands, and it was also quite nice to see. So with much encouragement based on my tastes, I gave this a listen and was like, I didn't expect this. Yeah, this will do. Like pretty much instantly. It cannot be stressed how strongly this album starts. Death to Los Campesinos, and second one with the long ass name, the constant
Broken
heartbeats sound like break
beats.
Yeah. It's gonna have dementia with every single track title on this album. Thank you for that, you Welsh bastards. Yeah, I really, really enjoy this album to such a degree that I haven't listened to any of their others. Although We Are Beautiful, We Are Doomed is I've added it to my music and will be onto it within the next week or so.
Exciting.
I just didn't really want to move on from this one yet.
What is it about this album that appeals to you? Like, what is it about this album that resonates with you when you listen to it?
It kind of sounds like backhanded, but it's an album that would have hit a lot harder with me if I first heard it when I was 16, 17, 18. And I probably would have liked it more if I first heard it then. But that means that now it's just really good at conjuring that particular headspace and that those emotions that come with that headspace in really vivid, ridiculously entertaining ways.
Yeah, totally. I completely get that. For me, it was like I had discovered this band when I was at that time in my life. And so they have, and this record has a very special place in my heart for that reason, but I drifted away from it with time, right? It was very much localized to specifically like my first year of university, actually. I didn't really discover this band or really get properly into them until after I graduated high school. But it was during this sort of transitional time in my life that I got really, really into them. And they were a very core part, particularly those first three records were a very core part of that time. And then I kind of drifted away from them. I felt a little bit of weird distance from them as the years went on. I guess as I was kind of trying to move past that time and the feelings of that time. Then I got back into them again this year. Like I rediscovered the joys of this band, and it all started hitting with this new, I guess, clarity and emotional intensity that I guess I hadn't been expecting. And I guess a big part of the whole theme of this year for me of like touching on and revisiting all of these big adolescent albums is, I guess, getting back in touch with that feeling, the feeling of that time, and trying to, I guess, find closure with where I'm at now versus where I was, the kind of person I was then, the kind of hopes and anticipations and dreams and feelings and relationships I had then. Wow, getting real therapy-esque here. Gonna step back from that for now. And
it would not be the first time, and it is not going to be the last time.
It's not going to be the last time in this video.
No, but anyway, that's a primer. But yeah, no, Jake, you're brand new to this record. I know you listened to their album Hello Sadness a while back, and I know you liked that record very much. What was your experience of listening to this record like this week, and how do you feel about it?
Honestly, it was a little bit mystifying, which is strange, just because I feel like if you didn't know this band as intimately as you two do, or even as well as Morgan does with just this album, when describing their appeal, it was just kind of like general, and it's just like, okay, I'll just sort of pick an album out of a hat and listen to that one just because Tyler's, really enthusiastic about it. So I chose Hello Sadness, which, this band gets a lot of comps to, or at least doesn't, I don't know if it gets a lot of comps in general, but for me at least, Hello Sadness was very reminiscent of a lot of the attitude and punk spirit of something like the Menzingers. Even though the Menzingers are a little bit more tinged with like a melancholic maturity that they have. Even though Hello Sadness kind of has like a maturation about it, but Hold On Now Youngster, very specifically, it was so strange to hear. It's like, it's mind-blowing that this is their first album, and also I didn't expect it to like, this is gonna sound like a fucking harebrained ass comparison, but it was kind of like listening to the Menzingers, but through like the sonic palette of something like Anamanaguchi at points. There's just so many points on this album that are so like bright and electronic that I was just like, whoa, okay. But like it's so upbeat and spry and fun, and like, oh man, these fucking guitar tones, dude. Most of the appeal in this band, at least for me so far, is the writing. But even if you don't really pay attention to the writing and you're just in it for some really, really enthusiastic, energetic instrumentation, you're gonna leave very satisfied. Because I mean, this shit is so propulsive and fun, and like, yeah, it definitely has the moments where it knows how to slow down and give you a healthy injection of the feels, but it never really like comes to a halt. I feel like this album has an incredible momentum about it. It's so tight. It's like it's vacuum sealed. There's no way that I could ever like start this album and like not finish it. Like even if I get interrupted, it's so weirdly holistic that I'd have to wait until the next opportunity to be able to completely finish it again, just because I don't really deem anything on here to be particularly inessential or weak. So it's interesting to see how fully formed they were out of the gate. And I guess that sort of stands to the longevity of the band. Like I now sort of like, listening to Hello Sadness, I was kind of like, okay, I can get why Tyler likes this band, but now it's just like, you know, oh, it's one of his favorite bands ever, and this is one of his favorite albums ever. And I'm just like, okay, I mean, like, I won't pretend that I wasn't like, that's interesting, of all the albums, huh? And then I listened to the album more properly, so, you know, duh. But like, I guess I just get it now a little bit more. I'm just like, oh, I see now why someone would have the affinity for this band that they do now. And I know that's kind of reductive to have made that judgment at all, knowing I only listened to one record of theirs, but still, it's just kind of like you get an idea of what a band is going to be like or how someone feels about them. And I was just kind of like, interesting. But now it's like, oh, when he says they have a bunch of albums and they have no misses and they're all this good, okay, I'm in.
Yeah. In terms of kind of, I guess, explaining the specific appeal of this band and I guess this album, the reason why it's like so totemic for me, I don't really know if I can break it down cleanly. I feel like my relationship with this record, and this is another reason why I'm sad he's not here, but I feel like my relationship with this record is not dissimilar to August's relationship with an album like Silent Alarm, where it kind of gets at and puts beautifully in the most sort of, not if not elegant, then at least simplest way possible, these very kind of profound emotions associated with being at a certain stage in your life and feeling a certain way, and the enormity of the way that everything feels, the way that everything that you're experiencing emotionally rises up to like a tidal wave to consume you. And there's a lot of recurring themes and lyrical motifs and ideas and bits of humor that permeate the whole Los Campesinos catalog that originate here. This is perhaps one of the records that they've made that's less immediately concerned with, I guess, the messier aspects of sex or whatever, but it is a record that's very detailed in its depiction of fractured relationships and I guess the nature of moving through and navigating these relationships at a particular time in your life when you're a teenager on the cusp of adulthood, and you and the person you're in a relationship with and your friends are all experiencing all of these emotions in very intense ways, and you're fracturing and you're colliding together and you're bursting apart and all of these things. And that is a feeling that is communicated beautifully on this record. Other themes of this album include the relationship of the youth to the world around them, to the people who make the rules. I guess there's this sort of punk rebellious aspect to this album, but it's also like it's kind of interrogating that. It's kind of like an investigation of that state of being for teenagers rather than just like an expression of it. It functions in both of those ways, which I think makes it really, really multi-layered and interesting. Like there's this sentiment that is expressed in about halfway through the record, this beautiful line that kind of feels like one of many emblematic lines of the record, which is, if you don't exist with hearts the size of a house brick, cease and desist, which is like this beautifully poetic way of describing this intense emotion that's associated with this time in your life, and that is exacerbated by the people that you're around and the way that you kind of feed off of each other, and then feeds into your, I guess, standoffish relationship with the world around you. And that feeling is also really eloquently and intensely described in the song Don't Tell Me to Do the Maths as well, which is a beautiful bit of like double meaning in that title, where it's like, don't pretend you know better than me, don't tell me to do the maths, but also like being at school and literally having to suffer through a math class that you don't want to be in. Like, it's this beautiful double meaning to that hook. And again, these really kind of emblematic lyrics that sum up the whole ethos as well. Tonight we're going to smash this place up, and then we're going to deck it out with fairy lights till we're content. That relationship, or I guess dichotomy, between like this aggressive violence that feels like the natural expression of all these emotions, but also like the kind of rebellious tenderness and like queerness even of the way you express it with like the fairy lights, and the dichotomy between the hardcore aspect of the sound and the twee aspect of the sound is a great reflection of the dichotomy between the, I guess, aggressive, some might even say like hyper masculine, which I think is kind of ridiculous considering how like camp Gareth can be, but like there's this ridiculous kind of hyper masculine aggression, and then also this really like undercutting that with these very kind of like emotionally bleating and parts that are unafraid to be kind of like pathetic as well. And
another through line for broken social scene.
Yeah,
gay.
Totally like like it's the gayest record about like very clear relationships between men and women, or boys and girls, I should say, considering like the setting of this album. And there's just so many like beautiful little images on this record that are like almost thrown away, but perfectly encapsulate this feeling of these relationships that are a core part of this time. Like another line in that same song, Don't Tell Me to Do the Maths, is all of us at home with the moon pouring through our curtains, working on our attitude towards the secondhand bookshop employees reading the inscriptions that were never meant for their eyes. Again, like that this beautiful little throwaway image of emotions and love being communicated through little inscriptions in a book that's shared, and then like the thinking about what will happen to those little inscriptions that exist long after the relationship itself has dissipated. And I think there's a total sort of beauty in that and a kind of sadness as well that's really profound and heartwarming and sad. The song My Year in Lists as well, which is kind of on a similar theme, where it's like this notion of the love letter trope, right? There's this notion of like writing poetry to your crush or your lover, and the expletive laden things that you say, and the way in which, because of being apart from each other. And that's another thing as well. A lot of the songs about relationships on this record are about long distance relationships specifically. And so there's this notion of like the distance between you, whether it is this actually transcontinental distance, or whether it's just like you're in this class and I'm in this class right now, and it feels like we're planets apart for an hour. That distance and the ways in which as a teenager you try and reconcile that with little gestures like writing love letters and notes and shit, and then the ways in which you kind of fetishize that is really funnily depicted, like quite comically, in My Year in Lists. You said send me stationery to make me horny, so I always write you letters in multicolors. Decorating envelopes for foreplay, damn extended metaphors, I get carried away. So there's this great sort of stream of consciousness thing that's happening in this song, where the emotion and the lust is so intense that in writing about it, Gareth kind of gets caught up in it and then meta-reflexively comments on that, which is hilarious. And again, just little throwaway lines like nothing says I miss you quite like war poetry you carved in your door with a Stanley knife. Again, this very specific image that totally communicates this feeling associated with this time. That is one of the most appealing aspects of this record to me.
I kind of wanted to talk a little bit more about that song in particular, My Year in Lists, because like, and you're absolutely right. Like, it's kind of hilarious and like cutesy, I guess that's probably not the right word, but you get what I mean. Like that first verse where it kind of has that like whole stationary and damn extended metaphors. But like when the chorus comes in, particularly the line, so put on every winter coat you've owned since 98 and every midnight sees the countdown to another awful day. Like, as someone like me personally, I kind of always have mixed feelings about New Year's, and there's like quite a few songs that I know that have that kind of capture that idea of like, oh, it's a new year, everyone's happy, but at the end of the day, it's nothing's changed. It doesn't really matter. And the song captures that feeling beautifully. And it does all of this in under 2 minutes, which is wild to me.
It's so economical. And then that second verse of the song where it kind of reaches ahead and he's like, on your request, I compile a list of my top 5 resolutions for this year. 1, I declined because then I decided I do not believe in the new year anymore. This great sort of real-time realization that this narrator is having where and confronting the idea of the new year, and the new year resolution is this kind of hollow thing that people use as I guess an affect to give the impression that they're going to make some kind of meaningful change in their lives when they don't really want to. I accept that it's time for a change, but not in places like this with people like these. And it's this very cathartic moment that the song builds to, despite the fact that, as you say, it's less than 2 minutes long. It's just that intensity is so overwhelming that it almost feels like the song would fall apart if they tried to sustain it for any longer. And so then they shift into a different mode afterwards. But that's, I think, a key track in that regard.
Yeah, for sure. And this is a thing that happens throughout the entire record with the lyrics is like, I don't know if we mentioned like that, obviously Gareth is the lyricist and the lead vocalist, but Alex is her name, right? She does a lot of that too and kind of completes the lines. And there's also just a lot of background shouting throughout. And especially on the second verse of My Year in List, which, you said like time for a change, but not in place like this. It was definitely one of my, if not my favorite verse on this entire album. I especially love the background vocals that like count the list items down, like 1, 2, like it's now reading it now, it's kind of like the bullet points or the numbers that where he's making this list are like just these specific lines saying like 1, I don't believe, or I declined. 2, I don't believe in the new year anymore. And it's just little things like that. And also on the chorus where, they both repeat that line, I cherish with fondness the day, and then they sneak in before I met you. And I love that.
What I love about that is it's essentially Gareth and then Alex are saying, I cherish with fondness the day I met you, but the other is coming in to say the before. And so it's kind of like you get a sense of the fracturing between these two people in this relationship that's communicated in this very subtle way that is also really funny as well, right? Like it's comic at the heart of it. It's just, it's so good.
So funny, so hilarious. Doesn't make me want to eat razor blades at all.
Yeah.
Oh God, that song hurts. It
does.
It's very. It is very funny. It is a very funny song, but it's also funny in the way that like a lot of In Bruges is funny to me.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh God,
It's
Ow.
I was going to say the movie, it actually reminds me of the scene in the movie Better Off Dead, where the main character tries to hang himself, then decides not to, and his mom comes in with a vacuum, hits him, and he just falls off the steps.
Yeah.
That's the exact kind of energy this album
It's
has.
tragicomic, right? Like it has the energy of when you're a teenager and you're fucking miserable, but you're laughing it off, right? You're always cracking wise about it. You're always just being funny, because that's what you do.
Permanently on copium.
That's how you cope, right? You always like making a fucking ass of yourself because you don't know what the fuck else to do. And
I'm so funny, right?
And
That's
it
my
does.
personality.
And it makes your friends laugh, and it's just the nature of things. And you are always all miserable, and you're always all talking shit and making each other laugh, and very seldom talking about
Love the
actually
jams
what's
and
going
stuff like
on, except for the times when you get really fucking pissed and then reveal too much, and it turns into this big emotional mess. That's this album, is those moments where it's like the dichotomy between those those what at the time seemed like painfully mundane experiences from day to day with your friends that you look back on with this kind of profound longing. Even anyway, leaving that there. But anyway, kind of dipping all over the map with this album. Let's start, because I basically want to talk about every song here anyway, so let's start with Death to Los Campesinos, which I think again,
that's the opening verse ever. Like, god damn.
All the fear. Don't be mad at me.
Yeah, I could recite this whole song from memory right now. I'm not going to do that because it's counterproductive, but I'm going to essentially do something very similar, which is just break it down alongside with your help as well. I think it's very much like the mission statement for the album, right? Like in terms of what it's about, it signals a lot of these themes of distance between being young and the other people around you, distance between you and the people your age who you're in relationships with, and just this general fog of distance between you and reality, like all of these different levels of distance that define being a disaffected teenager are right here in this song, in surreal ways, absolutely, but also in ways that sometimes come through incredibly clearly, like on that chorus hook. If you catch me with my hands in the till, I promise sugar I wasn't trying to steal, I'm just swimming in copper to smell and pretend like a robot, which is this little commentary on the ways in which, and I mean, this record is 2008, keep in mind, but also the ways in which technology and the technological divide are coming to define the way in which relationships are navigated as a teenager. And not just that idea, which is obviously a well-trodden idea, but the sort of more complex idea underneath it, which is that we kind of, as teenagers, rely on the distance that technology gives us to avoid the emotionally difficult realities of having to confront relationships and emotions in real life. So the sense in which you rely on that technological distance between you and the person you're talking to, the extent to which that being able to communicate with someone through technology rather than face to face is kind of like a defense mechanism against the difficulty of like real emotion, right? That's what the song is about. It's about being a teenager and leaning into that. I'm just swimming in copper to smell and pretend like a robot is this kind of clunky and cheeky and silly way of saying that I am essentially leaning into this technology to, I guess, hide behind. And that feeling of needing to hide and that feeling of not knowing how to navigate your emotions is then what the whole record is about from there. And especially subsequent songs on this record that talk about like distance in a relationship and teenage relationships falling apart and navigating teenage emotions. They all come back to this core feeling of distance that I think is the defining characteristic of being a teenager.
Yeah, it's also worth noting, like Los Campesinos, like before they even came out with this album, they were gaining like a bit of traction, and it was primarily, I believe, through MySpace. So this was kind of like when that whole, like, I mean, social media really like was in its early stages. So I think part of it is kind of related to that.
Yeah, absolutely. You could probably even read some commentary onto that, into lines like, I'll be control alt deleting your face with no reservations, and we'll stop fighting once your circuit board's ignited, singing I'm not finished, I'm not finished. Mistaking cables for veins can be quite misleading. Friction sparks from metal made it look like bleeding. Like these great, again, little analogs that are happening between, I guess, technology and technological malfunction, and then emotional miscommunication and not being able to be heard clearly or understood. Like, it's a very prescient song in that regard, like from the era of flip phones.
I was literally about to say from the era of Motorola Razors.
Yeah.
And I'll say it now because, like, I don't want to say it about every song because I'd just be repeating myself. But it's like, you know, the lyrics have all this, you know, this imagery and these like these meanings about essentially what Tyler said, right? But it, even if you like, and the way I listen to music a lot of the times, I don't always focus on the lyrics at first. I kind of take the music in and stuff, but like, God, the way the music is on this track, like it's like the perfect opener, especially when you get to that guitar solo near the end. And that to me is like
tasty.
One of the best moments just in their whole discography. Oh,
I did not expect something that slick on this album.
Oh
yeah.
No. Like, there's this great moment towards the end of Broken Heartbeats as well, before the song slows down, where like the guitar is just going fucking nuts, and like the dude is just like fucking hammering the fucking fretboard or whatever he's doing. I don't fucking know how it works, but he's just like losing his fucking mind, and it's getting faster and faster and faster and faster, and it's like that intensity. I mean, this album wouldn't be what it is if there weren't this perfect marriage between the intensity of all the emotions conveyed lyrically and the intensity of this band fucking bashing these songs out. Like, I think that's a good way of describing it, right? There's nothing like neat, clean about it. It is messy and gnarly, and that is the fucking point of it.
Yeah. It's basically like, if you want to call it noise twee pop, if you will.
Totally.
That's the genre that this is.
Yeah. And that's a great song, being the next song of the record as well.
Oh yeah,
that's a great song, I guess, to dig into next as well.
Mm-hmm.
This again, it's kind of, we've talked about this weird sort of distance in the first song that technology imposes, and then that teenagers lean into technology as this defense mechanism for navigating their weird emotional relationships with each other. And then you have Broken Heartbeats sound like breakbeats, which is kind of about this snotty attitude of distance and, I guess, rebellion against and looking down upon the older generations, right? I love that opening line of any more tears for the birthing pool, which is just like, gives you this hilarious image of this like water birth where the water is being supplied by the tears of the parents, fucking, ashamed of bringing this monstrous creation into the world. It's this very fucking ridiculous image. And then like the really darkness and the darker parts of this record really sneak up on you as well. Like the line, kiss him in the face with no lips and no tongue, but with your little middle index and ring fingers. It's like that you can't, the song's moving so quickly and the lyrics are moving so quickly that you can't really pick up on that, and then what's being communicated there, but then you kind of, your brain is cycling backwards to catch up and you're like, oh, okay, sure, yeah.
It's the most Gareth Campesinos thing ever to, instead of saying something like fist, to literally say your little middle index ring finger, and the way he delivers that too.
Yeah, he has
putting all those syllables just in that short amount of time.
He has this great way of like writing and delivering lyrics in the most like elaborate way possible to fill space, right? To always ensure that something is happening, like that there's never any kind of dead air. And that is a risky thing to do, right? Because you've got to be a really good and funny and genuinely talented writer, and you've got to understand like meter and phrasing and timing and all of these things really, really well to be able to do it in a way that's effective. But Gareth can do that. And I love the way that he kind of just, there's this total disregard for the basic rules of like lyrical structure, where you, instead of that, you're just getting like tons and tons of words shoved into a line to the point where it doesn't like fit with the music necessarily perfectly, and it's kind of like running on a little bit, but the energy is like pulling it and making it work and pulling it off. And I love that, again, with regard to that like snotty fucking sarcastic attitude of fuck you to your parents, or to, I guess, just generally the generation of your parents, and that line of plunge your hand, rip out my spine, replace it with a UV light so I can be the beacon of hope that you'd always expected. Like it's so fucking snotty and like smart ass. Like that's the thing, like this record is full of shit that you would say, and you might think of some of these gems to say to your parents when you're pissed off, and they would rattle back at you, don't be a smart ass. And this lyric is just like, this album is wall to wall, don't be a smart ass lyrics. And that's what's very one of the things that's very satisfying as well, is in this way in which you want to, you know, it's all the kind of like attitude and spunk and fuck you type of shit that you wish you had the balls to express, or maybe you did have the balls to express, but you were fucking hit over the fucking head for it. So you then, either way, you're at this point as an adult where it's like you have that energy of fucking fuck you energy, and this music is channeling it and putting it into the world in this way that's a lot funnier and a lot more meaningful than you could ever be. But also like making you feel like you are getting to experience the thrill of expressing that cathartically by listening to this music. So yeah, that's just really a innately satisfying aspect of the snotty element, I guess, of the snotty element of like punk music in general, I suppose, is that feeling of getting to feel like the things you've always wanted to say are being communicated in the most potent way possible by these people, and you're living through that. And that's, I guess, what I experience when I listen to a song like Broken Heartbeats sound like break beats.
Line from this to Pup is a straight line. This has morbid stuff energy all fucking over it, and I for one am very pleased. Yeah
It's funny you say that, because in my mind I never really thought, I guess because of, I don't know, Canadian, Welsh or whatever, I never really put those two bands together in my head. But now that you did that, I'm like, oh, it's like the same energy basically. Like
precisely. And I love everything about their person. Like they're just so like unapologetically abrasive and bratty and just kind of like smart alecky and mean, and it's just like yeah, exactly.
Dream tour.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So moving on then, I talked a little bit about Don't Tell Me to Do the Math, which I think continues this sort of same sort of theme that I've talked about. Again, there's this great line at the opening line of the song. We know that we could sell you magazines if only you would give your life to literature, just don't read Jane Eyre, which is hilarious, right? Because it speaks to this like very snooty desire of the, you know, upper working class, middle class parents of these children saying like, and I guess that's institutions of schools and universities and Tory government and whatever, saying like, you need to acquire a taste and class and read literature, but don't read Jane Eyre, which is like this very subversive feminist book, obviously. So it's like, do this, but oh no, don't do this. It's very the hypocrisy, I guess, of growing up in this environment is really beautifully all over this song. And again, that line about we're going to smash this place up and then deck it out with fairy lights is probably like one of my favorite lines on the whole record, for those reasons I said earlier, of just like meshing together that real raw aggressive energy and also the sort of subversive fuck you queerness of the mode of expression. It's it's everything to me.
I'd love how that Jane Eyre line is just basically screamed by like every member in the band, seems like.
Yeah.
Which I think there are like 7 that are on this album. But yeah, it's just like when they just yell that, it's just like right in your face, just don't do it. You know, they're just really emphasizing that.
Yeah.
And
absolutely. So it's like this opening stretch of the record has this kind of more, I guess, broader socio-cultural thing of like Britain, and then the next stretch of the record, I'd say, like for most of the rest of it, is much more about relationships and the ways in which the complex emotional scope you experience in the form of a torrid, short but emotionally intense high school relationship is basically an emblem of the teenage experience in so many ways. And you get that straight away with Drop It Doe Eyes, which is a song about being in a long-term relationship that is staggering towards an inevitable painful conclusion. I love that opening line of, you expected my war diaries, but time ran out and I let you down. A small thank you note written in French is no shorthand for this thing gave me writer's cramp. Again, like this lyric about all of this effort and emotional time you put into navigating this relationship in the form of writing letters and communicating through this distance that ultimately feels like this frustrating waste of time that is aching at you every time your hand gets sore from writing. And there's that central lyric of Dear Die with their eyes wide open is apparently inspired by an experience of Gareth having a dream about killing a deer. No, sorry, having a dream about being a deer and then traveling the next day to where his long distance partner was, and on the way seeing a dead deer on the side of the road and being like, wow, having this moment being like, wow, this is so fucking metaphorical for where I'm at. And trying to push that into the song where you're in the throes of this kind of dying stage of this relationship that wasn't meant to be, and you're fixating on these very morbid images. Another great one that I love is drawing tiny little pictures of skeletons to get across the sense of impending doom, and the leaves, like the artwork to Major Leagues, look like dead foxes on the hard shoulder. And again, this very kind of sense of like almost emo, morbid, emotional state that you get totally wound up in. And then that little picture of skeletons line gets reflected later on when he talks about, I'm 17 pages through this notebook now, and there are little more than pictures of how I see you in an X-ray machine. So this idea of the fact that he's so distant from this person that he's in both physically and emotionally, that he doesn't even really see her anymore as the person she is. He sees her as like just bones, a skeleton of the person she once was. Their relationship is a skeleton of what it once was. And like this is such a poetic and fucked up and emotional way of describing the state of mind. And again, it's all just condensed into this lightning fast, perfect burst of energy. I love it.
That's one of the most right there. That's one of the most incredible moments on the record, that the way it just builds up into that end with like the double time drums and
yeah,
turn up on your doorstep feeling like roadkill. Like,
yeah.
God.
That final line of the lyric of that song is so like fucking, it's like a punch in the gut. When I touch you, you fold up like an envelope with everything I ever wrote pouring out of your mouth. Like it brings that whole image from the start of the song about, you know, the distance of the relationship represented by the letters they would write each other, and the ways in which they've kind of bled together and folded up and just, they're just a spew of unrecognizable words. And then the sequencing of this record being what it is, the song, of course, goes right into my year-end list, which it continues this metaphor and explores this visual idea as a representation of this emotional state. And I think that's where like it becomes really clear to me what Jake said about this record being so like cohesive and like this singular thing rather than a series of songs. Like it's this tapestry of these, each individual song is like a little scene that represents a part of this wider whole, but they don't kind of sit as these kind of distinct entities the way that songs often do on most records. They're just all wound up in the fabric of this album. So I don't really think of it necessarily as these distinct songs as much as just like moving from scene to scene within this picture of being 17 and being at the end of this relationship, which is the framing of the whole record. I think is just being 17 and being at the end of this relationship that's falling apart, which is this awesome framing that lets you bathe in the catharsis of that, and also explore everything that's happening in the periphery of that, that's folding into your experience with that. So yeah, knee deep
So
in
good.
ATP. I love this story in this song. Like I love the Los Camp songs where it's just like Gareth is telling a story and you're just kind of being pulled along through this very specific scene that he's setting. And it's based on this real experience that he had at ATP, All Tomorrow's Parties, the festival, and meeting a girl there, and sort of a connection sparking between the two of them, and her kind of welcoming that, and then ultimately choosing not to reveal the fact that she actually has a boyfriend at home and isn't interested in being in a relationship. And this complicated set of emotions that he experiences, and this way in which it doesn't necessarily manifest in the song as an aggression towards her, but for her betrayal, as much as it does this kind of like moment of introspection for him. And also like there's that, but also like this decision, like it's complicated. So there's this story that's told of the scene that is set of this festival, and the way he reveals the information, and this, you get a sense of the emotional tone of the song, but you don't get a sense of the specifics of it until he lends you into them with the lines, maybe the lining of a winter's coat might not be the best place to hide a summer secret. Said every photo that you took that festival got lost in your camera in an insurance scam. And though underexposed, I could see from the quality his K Records t-shirt and you holding his hand. And I know he took you to the beach. I can tell from how you bite on your cheek every time the sand falls from your insoles. And when our eyes meet, all I can read is you're the B-side. Fuck. The way that he delivers all of that too, like it's getting so intense and it's building and building and building to this like heartbreaking little lyrical bit of wordplay, right? About the fact that they're at a festival bonding over music, and at the end of it, he's the B-side, which is this it's such an effective and heartbreaking, and like, how the fuck are you so good at writing sort of visual
comes off as effortless to the point where it's almost annoying. You're just kind of like, man, fuck you. Like, how do you do this like this?
Yeah. And then the emotional complexity I was getting at is kind of comes to the fore at the end of the song, where he references people, presumably his friends or someone, saying, it's not what you like, it's what you're like as a person, presumably trying to give him some hard facts about why he's maybe treated the way he is, you know, and the way he kind of just like stubbornly rejects this by saying, well, I need new hobbies. That's one thing for certain. Like continuously refusing to accept that the problem might be that there might be a problem with the way he acts, and instead reverting back to his interests and whether he can use them, and that they're compatible enough with the people he meets, right? And it's this very funny sort of like rhyme moment of self-awareness at the end of the song. And I love, like we talked about with Doe Eyes, the way, and Lists as well, like the way that the song functions to build that emotion by revealing more and more information as it goes on, but also musically getting more and more intense as it goes on as well. So you get this real sense of progression that's happening even within these shorter bite-sized tracks. It's really great.
Out of all the tracks, like listening back through this album multiple times this week, out of all the tracks, I think this is the one that I like understood more the most. Doesn't really make sense, but like this track, I always it was always kind of a lower, but like I really understand what it's about now that I like read deeply into what it's going for. And you're right, like the way the music complements what he's saying, and like that moment where right before he says like his K record t-shirts and you holding his hand, and then the full band just comes in, and I know he took you to the beach, and it's just like you just kind of feel the pain just in your heart right there. Just, and also the very first line, which I love, and this is another very Gareth Campesino thing to do, where he says like, in every sentence that I spoke began and ended in ellipsis, and he pauses as if there was an ellipsis in between that word, and I just love that.
And that's a great vivid image at the start of that song as well, of him like reading this letter, each of 8 fingers gripping what he wrote clung on tightly like parenthesis, and for each correctly used apostrophe I could feel my heart sink inside my chest in front of me. That's a great line. Like just like this boiled over resentment of, oh fuck, he's good at grammar, fuck. It's
just the times I have said that to myself.
Just like, could you be any more perfect, you fucking asshole? That energy of the song is great.
Man.
Typically that's what we're working with as dudes going against other dudes. Like, oh, he can spell. He cleans himself.
Yeah.
Oh, what, do you take a shower? Ooh.
He cleans his room every day.
And then you get this.
He doesn't live in squalor.
So you have this character in this song, this woman or this person who withholds this information from Gareth and leads him on, and then leaves him kind of destitute. And then you have a similar sort of character in the next song. This is how you spell ha ha ha. We destroyed the hopes and dreams of a generation of faux romantics, which is a great song title, incidentally. And it's like this is kind of like a bit of an undercutting bit of self-mockery, as well as this genuine sort of commentary on like people who are very affected and pretentious and like wield their excessive emotion as this like signifier that they're somehow this really intelligent and important person who feels everything deeply because they're so like in tune with the suffering of the world. Like, this is a song that mocks that sort of character by telling the story of Gareth being in a relationship with a girl who's like this. And I love, again, the great way of just throwing you into the song with this vivid image that immediately tells you about the entire emotional tone of the song, which is, I hate the stench of coffee on your breath, and I hate to feel its warmth against my neck. And what right do you have to have nightmares about me when all I wanted was to sleep? That line is a great line if you've ever been in a relationship with someone who wields their emotions against you. What right do you have to have nightmares about me when all I wanted to do was sleep? And there's this great like continual story told in the song about this incredibly like manipulative person who basically is so consumed with their state of mind and their emotions that they are completely disconnected from the people who are wrapped up in them, and to the point where Gareth basically has to extricate himself from the life of this person. And what I love about this song is musically, it's quite distinct from a lot of the other songs in the record, in the sense that it exists for the most part in this state of like constant tension instrumentally. Like, it's just like riding this very intense building, broiling emotion that occasionally kind of explodes into the start-stop chorus and then resumes that tension again. It's very kind of like, I kind of get chills when I listen to it because of that whole broiling emotion. And it works because it is actually building. It's not just staying still. That there's this spoken word bridge, which itself feels like this kind of like ironic bit of tongue-in-cheek mockery of like spoken word as this tool for intensity. But but it's this beautiful kind of like wry mocking of her, where he's like, you walk in from your mother's balcony, panda-eyed and freezing cold. You bury yourself in my chest of warm. I notice the goosebumps on your arms, millions. And whether it's because of the numbers of hours spent laid down, face down on my bed, listening to white noise, or well, obviously it's not. I somehow managed to translate them from Braille, and the trails on your skin spoke more to me than the reams and reams of half-finished novels you'd leave lying all over the place, and every quotation that dribbled from your mouth like a final fatal live journal entry. I know I'm wrong. I'm sorry.
Jesus. The live journal entry. Oh man, this really was written in the MySpace era, huh?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. But it's yeah, I just, it's very fucking tongue-in-cheek and silly, and I absolutely love it. It's and and I like the fact that in the context of the song, that hook and the title of the song becomes recontextualized as this expression of fuck you towards this girl and this type of person in question. I've destroyed the hopes and dreams of this generation of faux romantics by essentially walking out on you. With this great line of, this is no existential crisis, just turn your pain into piety and then set your alarm clock for 4 a.m. the next morning. I love the song to bits. It's so like extra in a way that is different to the ways in which the rest of the record is extra, I think.
One little like small thing that I kind of appreciate about this record is that I love how on this album, like the song titles are like ridiculous and long, and it kind of comes from that era where a lot of bands, like pop punk bands like Fall Out Boy, had ridiculously long titles that typically had nothing to do with the actual song, except these titles like are actually said in the song. Like it's pretty much a lyric. And like for this song, it's like the main refrain, like they say it multiple times. And I don't know, that's just a little detail that I love.
Yeah, there's a great quote from Gareth about this song that says, I know this song has a stupidly long title, but it acts as a good test to see which people are morons, depending on whether they reference it as being Fall Out Boy-esque or Ball Boy or 10 Grand-esque.
Let me be perfectly honest.
King.
Let me be perfectly honest. I'm not that familiar with the latter.
No, me neither. But
No.
I know enough to get what he's getting at, and it's very funny and just speaks to that sort of like tongue-in-cheek aspect of it. That's always there.
The big takeaway is that Fall Out Boy sucks.
Yes.
Got him.
Yeah. And so then it's like the climax of this arc of songs about these kind of like fractured, falling apart, doomed relationships is that breakup or that leaving that happens in that song. And then We're All Accelerated Readers is kind of like the song that embraces loneliness and embraces isolation and embraces like that post breakup period where you try and kind of like find a freedom, or I guess a defiance in being a loner and in being isolated. Gareth himself describes it as a dismissal of any suggestion of love, which is hilariously over the top and emo of him to say. An attempt to rally and cry for the lonely, because records and books and, well, not films because films are rubbish, but things like that are far more dependable than any notion of a life partner, which is, I had to read that in full because I didn't want to misquote him.
Not films, they're rubbish.
So this is really this feeling that we're all accelerated readers in the sense that we get more dependence and more, I guess, trust and reliance in art than in other people, basically. And it's kind of a cynical viewpoint that definitely it probably emerged out of Gareth writing the song post breakup. But I love that opening line again. I was sick in my mouth because of the fear of the scent of an ex-girlfriend, which is great. Just hilariously over the top, right? No more conversations about what Breakfast Club character you'd be. I'd be the one that dies. No one dies. Then what's the point? This great sort of
I think that means you'd be Ali Sheedy.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite lines.
And then this great verse where it's like he's ruminating on the, I guess, perceived inability to ever satisfy this person he was with. You should have built a statue, and so I did of you, and you were ungrateful and slightly offended at the dimensions of it. You said you looked less like the Venus de Milo and more like your mother in a straitjacket. And then that's a funny image. And then it's just immediately juxtaposed with, I think it's great that you're doing fine now, but enough is enough, and I've had enough. Like this real dripping sarcasm in this song that I absolutely love. And then there's one of the most meta-reflexive and self-aware lyrics on the record. I'm not Bonnie Tyler, I'm not Tony Braxton, and this song is not going to save your relationship. And this sentimental movie marathon has taught us one thing. It's the opposite of true love is as follows: reality. So it's a very cynical song. It's a very cynical song, but it's cathartic to me because it lets you to experience this very real kind of snotty state of mind that you exist in post a breakup, where you just think that people are fucking stupid and you just want to sit around and read or watch a movie or listen to music in your bedroom, and that's all you need. Since we became accelerated readers, we never leave the house. It's a great song.
Not to belabor the comparison, but it has the exact same energy as "See You at Your Funeral" by Pup, where it's a song that's entirely about making good, positive life choices purely to spite your ex.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of more dour than that, because it's not even about making good, positive life choices. It's about like becoming a recluse to spite the concept of relationships. But like, again, it doesn't pretend that it offers healthy solutions to your suffering. No. In fact, the whole point is that it's about how you deal with things in the most unhealthy way possible when you're that age. And that is at the core of it. But again, sequencing of this record, there's a reason this is my favorite album. It's not just because I love all these songs. It's because the way that the emotional journey this record takes you on as it moves from song to song is, when you get to the end, just so overwhelming and so perfect that it's just hard to put into words. And you've had this long bending arc of this emotional turmoil that is so reflective of all the shitty shit you experienced as a teenager. And then you get You, Me Dancing. They hold it off until this exact point on the record, where you've had the record's most cynical arc, its most cynical bent in these last couple of tracks. And then it's like this moment of growth, this moment of like, or not even necessarily growth, but kind of just like you stop caring. And it is this, it's romantic in this way that is kind of shocking and unguarded to a certain extent. But it's also kind of like romantic in this song almost as a form of defiance in this weird way. Like, before I take the risk of painting myself as this melancholic and melodramatic teenager with that last song, and so I'm rebelling against that by saying fuck you. Okay, I can be emotional, let's be emotional, let's write the fucking emo twee equivalent of LCD Sound System's All My Friends and put it at the fucking 3/4 point on our album and just have it be the most cathartic song of all time. And it's like, oh, that slow build, that slow instrumental build from that single ringing note that starts the song, and then the fucking, because again, like the last song is about, retreating into isolation, right? And then the next song begins with this single isolated note that then starts building and building as the song starts coming together instrumentally, and the noise of the people that you shut out becomes louder and louder as you start to let them in again. And it's all happening musically, right? But no lyrics at all yet. It's all happening purely musically. You're getting a sense of this narrator who has retreated in the last few songs, finally letting the world in again. And it becomes fucking the most triumphant shit in the whole fucking world. Oh my God. This song.
But perhaps the greatest indie rock guitar riff of all time. contender.
It's like, it's so classic immediately when that riff comes in after that building, which incidentally is a trick that I'm almost certain that Frightened Rabbit borrowed for Skip the Youth on Winter of Mixed Drinks, because that song is the exact same structure as this one. Anyway, that's an aside. But yeah, the song, when the riff comes in, and you immediately get put into this carefree club landscape. The beats were coming out of the speakers and were winding up straight in your sneakers. What a way to describe dancing that is. Like, the beats were coming out of the speakers and winding up straight in your sneakers. Like, that's so like poetic and shit and visual. That's why I love it. It was always really visual lyrics that immediately put you there. And there's this great sort of commentary on perception and the scene itself that they're coming in. It's sad you think we're all just scenesters, and even if we were, it's not the scene you're thinking of, just taking props from 90s boy band fashions or crop tops and testosterone passion, which, you know, speaks to how subversive what they're doing is, what their particular brand and twisted aesthetic and variant of punk and emo music is, with its inherent queerness, with its inherent, you know, campness, with its inherent tweeness. It's great. It's the fucking anthemic rallying cry for the kind of person who these songs are all written about and from the perspective of. This is their rallying cry. And then therefore, you know, it's you know, at the risk of sounding lame or whatever, at the risk of sounding like, not lame, but like at the risk of sounding basic, it's about, you know, the triumphantness of being uncool, right? If there's one thing I could never confess, it's that I can't dance a single step. But we're dancing anyway. You stop caring that you don't know how to dance, you can't fit in with these trends, whatever the local dance trend is, whatever the local kind of aesthetic is that everyone fits into. You can't do that, and yet you're doing your own variant of that anyway.
Those final two lines, man. Fucking, we're undeveloped, we're ignorant, we're stupid, but we're happy.
Yeah. Oh, I tell you that the moment that really undoes me. I tell you the moment that really undoes me is in that outro, is at the start of it, when he's like, I always get confused because in supermarkets they turn the lights off when they want you to leave, but in discos they turn them on, and it's always sad to go, but it's never that sad because there's only so many places you're guaranteed of getting a hug when you leave.
I need a hug.
Like I mean, it's so like emotionally hard on sleeve, and it's so like completely forthright, and that is the power of it. And there's a really beautiful catharsis in lines as well, like, not sure if you mind if I dance with you, but I don't think right now that you care about anything at all, which is, again, a nice little winking commentary on the kind of disaffected youth stereotype. If only there were clothes on the floor, I'd feel for certain I was bedroom dancing, and it's all flailing limbs at the front line. Every single one of us is twisted by design. Great little analog there between dancing and sex, and then bringing it back to the, you know, inherent fucked up nature of who you are, and the song being a celebration of that. And it just might be the best song ever made, to be honest. I don't know. It is when I'm listening to it.
It's up there.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only thing that matters really, is that it is when you're listening to it.
Yeah.
Especially with a song like this.
Yeah.
For sure. Well, to go back what Jake was saying about the last lines, like, to me, if you remember back to You Forgotten People, when I said that album has a single line that to me sums up what the album is about, like the core of the album. And that's what in Lover Spit, when they say, like, it's time we grow old and do some shit. And to me, the last line of this song is that for this album. We're underdeveloped, we're ignorant, we're stupid, but we're happy. Like, that's really what the album, I feel like, is about.
Yeah. No, I think you're bang on, to be honest. And I love that it's kind of like this climactic point, but it's not the end of the record. You get to ride this wave through the next few songs, and it becomes this kind of sustained climax that this album has. We exhale and roll our eyes in unison. I don't know the general perception but I feel like this is a really underrated song. It's kind of a bit of an industry commentary as well. It's a song about like misogyny and sexism within music press, and I guess it kind of undercuts a lot of the, if you would perceive a lot of this album to have this kind of like raw, contorted masculine energy, then this song undercuts a lot of that. And obviously the presence of Alexandra undercuts a lot of that as well. But yeah, again, some really classic lyrics here. I spent the last 7 years perched on the edge of my bed, scratching "I am incredibly sincere" into my forearm, which is a reference, I believe, to Richie Edwards of Manic Street Preachers carving "for real" into his arm, and famously the big hullabaloo that made. And so I guess the chain of influence and of spirits that carries on there, which is, an interesting connection to make.
Gotta love how fucking fragile the UK press is.
Yeah. A 15-year-old's editorial, some lazy innuendo. The last man standing is a girl. 4 sweaty boys with guitars tell me nothing about my life. And the earth's air pressure gets far greater when I hear you. You should try hard. That's another great line for describing like being around someone insufferable. Like it literally gets harder to breathe when I'm around you. But I'm not going to say that. I'm going to say the earth's air pressure gets far greater when I hear you, which is this like, again, it turns like this person into this kind of cosmic force, which is just so good. And I love one of my favorite moments of this whole album is the sort of outro of this song, where it's kind of an embrace of the stereotype. It's kind of like saying, yeah, you see us as these incredibly disaffected people who don't care about the world, who have no investment, who exhale and roll their eyes in unison. And yeah, we do those things. We're going to do those things. We're going to especially do them if they piss you off. And if you think that we're all just these kind of morose, constantly depressed, suicidal, mopey people, if that's what you think we are, we're going to fucking rub that in your faces. We're going to shout, woe is me, woe is you, woe is us together at you. And it's going to feel like the most cathartic thing in the world if you're one of us. And it's going to feel like the most annoying, stupid, irritating thing in the world if you can't relate to us. And that's my favorite moment of the whole record, actually, is when it's just this giant chorus shout of woe is me, woe is you, woe is us together. And that, I think, maybe if I had to pick one lyric that encapsulates this whole record, it's that, because it's like, it's the leaning into the, garishness of the emo aesthetic. But it's also the grounding it in the familial nature of what this band is doing, and the fact that you, regardless of what emotion you're experiencing, regardless of whether you want to completely isolate yourself, regardless of whether you want to surround yourself with friends, regardless of whether you're in the middle of an awful heartbreak, or regardless of whether you're in the middle of the, most intense euphoria of your life, you're never really alone at this point. And that is shit. I weep a little bit when I hear it, because of all of that stuff that it makes me think about.
Yeah, I think that whole like last line is just like it's probably even actually a better encapsulation, if that's a word, of what this album's really about. And that specific moment where the time signature changes to go into the last, and we actually, I don't think we've mentioned, but the fucking violin playing on this album too, that's part of like musically what really gets to my core on this. It's just leads with that little melody. Oh man,
it's all part of the maximalism, right? Of the sense you get of these people crammed into a room with their instruments, making as much noise as possible. I mean, I made reference to, I guess, Arcade Fire's Funeral in the Broken Social Scene video as this kind of like fulcrum point for the specific indie aesthetic and a specific indie sound, and this like idea of like the spirit of indie in the 2000s being as many people as possible in as small a place as possible, playing as many different instruments as possible, as passionately as possible. And that's what that record is all about. And the Los Campesinos to me are kind of like they're capturing that same energy. And then Arcade Fire, I think, are a huge reference point for the specific aesthetic and sound and that real intense emotion of it. and the strings and ornate instrumentation, like the real kind of music class aesthetic. Like you could imagine a terrible screenplay written about these people meeting each other in a music class, and you get that whole feeling subtextually, like it's never explicitly alluded to or anything, but you get this whole sense of communal nature rooted in all of their instrumentation coming together as a part of the music. And again, that's the thing, like this record never leaves you a moment to breathe. You're always being assaulted by the splendid noise of all of these people. And that goes into Sweet Dreams, Sweet Cheeks and 2007, the year punk broke, which is I kind of see as this kind of like duology extended climax finale of this album, where it's I guess it kind of becomes less about the lyrics and more just about like shouting and playing and being as loud as possible, which I love. That's how this record ends, right? Because you had so much sentiment and so much emotionality and so much complex poetic lyricism. And you get more of that in Sweet Cheeks as well. When the smaller picture is the same as the bigger picture, you know that you're fucked is a great line. And as is when you're trading paper cuts for splinters, you're out of luck. It's great. It's great lyrics. But I mean, more than anything at this point in the record, you're just taken away by the swelling, just torrential noise that these people are making, the ways in which those violins that you're talking about are playing off these stormy, heavy guitars that are like as loud as possible, almost post-rocky in terms of like the effects pedals and shit that are layered onto them. And it's just this, to the point where at the end they're just like this stormy noise that's happening, and then the song ends with like them just shouting into the void. It's just this really dynamic and hard-hitting into the record that well, I guess fake out end, because then 2007 comes in. And I love it. And then 2007 comes in and does a very sort of similar thing, except it's more focused around that swelling musicality with that great little glockenspiel xylophone thing that's happening that rips my heart into pieces when I hear it, to be honest. And it's just this simple melody that is perpetuating itself over and over and over and over again, as Gareth is kind of like sitting alone with his Walkman, ruminating. And all of this is happening in his head. It's a phenomenal way to end the album. Words fail him, because when you get to this level of intensity, words do fail you, and it is the most fitting way possible to end an album like this, I think.
For sure, yeah. And like, even though it's the penultimate track, like it goes to the, well, specifically about Sweet Dreams, Sweet Cheeks. It, you know, at this point, like it just goes to like how consistent this album is, because this is, I don't know if it is my favorite, but it might be my favorite chorus on the album. Like it's certainly up there. Just the way that Gareth and Alex are both singing something completely different, and they're just going at it. And then you get to that whole like instrumental break where the guitars are like, one guitar is playing a neat little melody and then the other one's just going off, and they climax into that very end. It's just it's a perfectly written song. And of course, you know, 2007, once again, a perfect song. Just the way that whole thing ends, it just caps off the record. It's like it's honestly, 2007 is one of the reasons that this is my favorite Los Campesinos album, because it just feels like the most conclusive ending to any of their albums, at least for me. Just absolutely wailing at the end. It kind of reminds me of another huge favorite of mine, which you not surprising if you know me, which is Comforting Sounds by Mew. Where that album is, they sing for a little bit and then they just go off for the rest of it, and that's the end. And man,
and spoiler alert for our listeners, we will be talking about Mew's Frangers this year in a subsequent record club of mine, and Connor will definitely be back for that. So
that's an album with a song on it that's going to be really fun to talk about.
Oh, I mean, yeah, look, put a pin in it. Will I can't think about that right now. I'm too anyway.
No.
But yeah,
that's a tearjerker album right there.
Sweet Dreams, Sweet Cheeks is great because like I said, the lyrical content doesn't matter too much, but you do, like, when you read into it, you do get this great reinforcement of just like the intensity of the feeling, and that being the whole point. Lines like, we are burning 5-story buildings, laying man traps at the fire exit, playing feedback over tannoy systems. You look desperate, you look pathetic. And it hits as hard as the blow to the head or a smash to the skull or a knee to your chest. Sweet Dreams, Sweet Cheeks, Oh Tomorrow. Like it's just pummels you in the way that all of the emotions on this album, if you've ever experienced them, do. And it's just an ultimate reinforcement of that in the final stretch. And then the record just it just ends in this perfect place of it never compromises or brings you down in any way. And it's I love albums that end in a way where like they give you time to think about what you've processed while they're still going. And that's what the closing track of this record does, is that it gives you time to process everything you've just heard while also steamrolling you in its own way. And I think that's really cool, to be honest. Mm-hmm. I mean, so I guess I hope I've communicated why this is my favorite album now. Like, I just think that every second of it is perfectly in tune with itself and everything, that all of the possibilities of what it could be. And I feel like every single emotional experience, whether or not you've had the specific experiences that are detailed in these songs, doesn't matter. The emotions that are communicated are at the core of it, and they're universal. And I think everyone from all walks of life could understand them in some way or another. And so it feels like the most definitive document of this particular stage of life, which to me is kind of like the most important stage of life as far as I'm concerned. And so therefore this album becomes the most definitive document on living as far as I'm concerned. And therefore it becomes my favorite album.
I think that you definitely displayed that, like, I think the key with this album is that it just displays an insane amount of artistic synergy that albums like it don't always manage to have just quite on the same level as it, you know?
Yeah, for sure. It's an album that, like, for me, like, it just makes me feel so many like different things all in one. It's just like, it's an album that you can have a blast listening to. You can just like be in a good mood and just play, or if you're in a bad mood and you want to cry, you can still put this album on. Like, it's so multifaceted like that. And Gareth is such a great writer that he's able to pull that off, while still even throwing in, of course, like we mentioned, his sense of humor, and the music, and all the musicians that play on it just do such a great job at capturing all of this youthful energy and happiness and sadness at the same time. And it's just like, it's the perfect album. Yeah.
And it's a credit to this band as well, that all of the attributes that make this album so affecting and perfect are never lost on Los Campesinos from this point onwards. Even through the lineup changes, the writing never gets any less sharp, not even in the slightest. The writing is my favorite aspect of this whole band, is how good the writing is. But that energy that this record has is sustained through every record they have. They've never put out a record that doesn't have the emotional intensity of this record, just reflected at different stages of life, right? And so this is the fulcrum point. This is the core. This is the root where it's all based. This is the root. This is the table where it's all based. Sorry, that was terrible.
He's fucking Lulu'd on the Los Campesinos episode.
Yeah. So on that note, favorite tracks and ratings for Hold On Now, Youngster by Los Campesinos. Connor, why don't you go first as our guest?
Ooh, okay, yeah. This is one of those albums where it's so hard to pick just three because it's so cohesive as a whole. But if I had to, this could change, but I think I'm going to go with, actually, for my favorite, I think I might have to go with Broken Heartbeats Sound Like Breakbeats, which I didn't really talk about, but that whole ending just melts my heart, and the way it transitions into the next track, beautiful. And then 2007, The Year Punk broke my heart. And then third pick, I'll go with My Year in Lists. Of course, there's no least favorite, and it is a 10 out of 10.
Hey,
beautiful. Jake.
All right. Three favorites. I'm going to say You, Me Dancing, My Year in Lists, and 2007. Least favorite, I'm gonna say it's by no means a bad song, but the part on the record that I haven't fully acclimatized myself yet is probably This Is How You Spell, ha ha ha, we destroyed the hopes and dreams of a generation of faux romantics.
Deep breath.
Yeah. It's a 9.
Oh, sick. That fucking that shit is hot. Holy shit. I'm fucking please. Let's go. Morgan.
Another one. My three favorites are My Year in Lists, Death to Los Campesinos, and You, Me Dancing. Least favorites, also probably going to go with This Is How You Spell, etc. But it's still a good song, so fucking whatever. And there's also a 9.
Okay. Well, needless to say, it's a 10 for me. And I
Really?
I didn't see that coming.
Favorite album of all time, 7.5.
Yeah. What are you, August?
So yeah, I don't have favorite tracks. So yeah, forget that. Anyway,
Favorite track is yes.
Favorite track is Hold On Now, Youngster.
Yep.
And that gives us an average from 4 ratings of 9.5, which, August and Saoirse, they missed their opportunity. So it's unfortunate that whatever they think won't matter.
How terrible.
I just want to quickly mention that my mutual ratings on Rate Your Music for this album is almost an entire point above the actual average rating, which is weird because even Pitchfork loves this album.
This album has a 3.39 on Rate Your Music.
Oh, come on.
It just doesn't, that website just doesn't understand emo.
It really doesn't.
Tyler's
they don't understand fun.
This band, The Twilight Sad, this band right here, and then you look at it, Rate Your Music, and you're just like, what the
which gets me, like, when people call me Rimcore, and yes, I know it's just that one commenter from over a year ago, but I'm still hanging up on it.
I love that you still think about that.
When people call me that, when people say my taste is Rimcore, and then like 4 of my top 5 favorite bands are Los Campesinos, The Twilight Sad, Frightened Rabbit, and fucking who else? The Hotel.
Oh yeah, Frightened. Oh god, that one pisses me off real bad. None
of whom I don't think have a single bolded album on that website. So
it's just like,
man,
Midnight Organ Fight not being bolded is a failure.
That's insane, actually.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's the bottom of the barrel. Like,
purpose of bolding an album
should also be bolded. Pedestrian Verse should also be bolded.
But
I'm still waiting.
Yes, but
I'm waiting for Full Collapse to get bolded.
That's close, to be fair, but it's stupid that it's not.
Oh, true.
To this day, I still don't understand why Pedestrian Verse by Frightened Rabbit isn't heralded as one of the best written indie rock albums of all time by literally every human being on the planet. But I digress. Anyway, thank you for sticking with us for this record club. Thank you, Connor, for joining us again. If you're a fan of Los Camp at home,
pleasure.
no worries. If you're a fan of Los Camp at home, let us know what this record means to you in the comments below. Let us know
All
what your
7 of you and Stephen Hayden.
Let us know. It's actually Ian off of IndieCast who loves this band. Stephen isn't really.
Okay.
Stephen isn't really familiar with them, but Ian is always flying the flag.
I'm familiar, Stephen.
Yeah.
I'm Ian.
Directly to you.
But yeah, like what's your favorite Los Camp record? If not this one, how would you rank them? Whatever you have to say about this band. I mean, I know I genuinely want to hear it. So I'd love it if this record video got at least 1 or 2 comments. So let us know in the box below. Make sure you check out our main reviews for this week on The Killers and Boldy James and the Alchemist. Stick around as well for our extra special video this week on the 35th anniversary of Paul Simon's Graceland. That will be hitting you soon too. And yeah, August isn't here to send us out. That's okay. Rock over London, rock on Chicago. Woe is me, woe is you, woe is us together.